Hello Year 10 and welcome to Power of Language, your next unit of study. The first thing that we need to talk about is context. So if you want to pause the video now and write down this definition, that would be a great idea. It's just for revision. Context is the environment that surrounds something, such as a word, a passage, or work of art or literature that can throw light on its meaning. So basically the circumstances of when something was created. Now we have an image here that was very important in its context, very specifically 1989 Tiananmen Square, and this is one man, standing up against the might of the Chinese Communist regime. But it does have relevance in our current day because, it shows that an individual, however small, has that power to stand up against oppression. So while something can have a really significant meaning in its time period when it's created, it can also have meaning later on for us. Now, what is this unit about? So first of all, our powerful choice of words and image can shape our perspective on universal values like freedom, justice, equality, and peace. And we'll look at each of these different values and how they're represented over time. Like I said, composers create texts that have a meaning for them in their own context, but the meaning might also have relevance in future contexts. And finally, that power of voice and language often challenges or affirms global perspective. So either it makes us really think about what we believe, or it justifies what we already believe and supports it. So the first context that we need to discuss is historical context. So this is your time and place when something is created. So you can find historical context by asking the following questions. When was the item made, created, or composed? What was going on at the time? And historical context includes, the political and social climate of the time as well as the physical context of a text. So you'll see that each of these contexts that we talk about will overlap. A good example of that, if you want to pause the video now to make sure that you write down this information or important notes, please do so. An example of this is when Swift wrote his essay called A Modest Proposal in 1729. Now, it might seem not very relevant at the moment for you, but he was criticising his government and the way that they dealt with the poor. So in his essay, he suggests the following. That for preventing the children of poor people in Ireland from becoming a burden to their parents or country and for making them beneficial to the public, which is his purpose, he's been assured by a very knowing American of his acquaintance in London that a young, healthy child, well nursed, is at a year old a most delicious, nourishing and wholesome food. Infant's flesh will be in season throughout the year. So obviously he's not being serious and not saying that we should be cannibals, but he is suggesting that the people in his government are so incredibly cruel to the poor. They don't provide any welfare. They might as well be eating their babies. So it's a satire, it's black comedy, it's supposed to be funny, but it's also supposed to point out some real weaknesses in government. Next context is physical context. So this is the space around something and how that influences how you see it. We'll look at an example in a minute. So this is how we find the physical context. Where is it? What does it have to do with the place in which it can be found? And where is the community in which it is found? So a good example of that is when you look at a photograph of a woman's face. It looks different when it's framed in an art gallery to when it's in your friend's photo album. It has different significance. If you want to pause the video now to write down any important notes, please do so. An example of physical context here with the AR-50A1 gun being in the hands of Michelangelo's David. This is a real ad that caused real uproar in the Italian community, especially because of the artistic importance of Michelangelo's David. So that physical context of having a gun there with a work of art, something that's supposed to be beautiful, peaceful, a real example of man, and then to put a gun in its arms is quite controversial. Whether or not the people that buy guns were persuaded to buy guns through this is unknown to me. I don't know whether this actually achieves its purpose, but we can look at it in terms of being in a particular physical context and how that impacts on the meaning of the original statue. Our third context is political context. So this is the political environment around which something is created. It really does give purpose to text. So we can find our political context by asking the following questions. What is the agenda of the creator? So the person that creates this piece of literature, what do they want to get across to their reader? Why was it made? Does it help people? Does it promote ideas, and what are those ideas that are being promoted? So political messages often are intended to persuade one way or the other. So who created the message and what their relationship is to others reflects how you interpret that message. You can pause this slide now so that you can have write down some notes. A good example of a political agenda here is this meme that we found about Trump, done in his first election campaign, so 2016, and he quotes here, "I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose voters," which was an actual quote from Trump. But visually, a link has been made to the movie Reservoir Dogs, which is a great movie, but it's a Quentin Tarantino movie. It's particularly violent, and the creator of this meme for Trump is drawing that, that connection between Trump being violent, politically driven and willing to do everything, to this movie, Reservoir Dogs. Here's another example of physical context, but also political context. There's definitely an agenda here. So this lovely pizza restaurant has had the billboard put up against same-sex marriage. It's okay to say no. And the way that they are critiquing that is to write to pineapple on pizza. This is very specific to a historical period and a political period. So its relevance doesn't probably last as long as what we would like it to. But you can see there that the situation in which it's placed is very visual, and there's definitely an agenda on the part of the pizza place. They believe in same-sex marriage, and there's definitely an agenda there for that coalition for marriage as well. The fourth context that we need to look at is social context, and you will need to go to the slideshow and download it and look at the links for this one, because my the sound won't work from my computer to play these YouTube clips. But basically, social context is the social community in which something is viewed. So this is how we work out what it is. Who created the text? Who was the audience that they were trying to appeal to? The way that you could think about social context is that, we watch movies in class and we look at them very differently to how you would, when you're at the movies or with your friends watching a movie. So, depending on where you see that text, it will make the experience of understanding it very different. There's two examples here. I will explain them and then you'll have to pause the video and go to the YouTube clips. The first one is a clip from Fantasia, and you may or may not be familiar with it. It's a part of it where it goes through the evolution of the world, and particularly a section where dinosaurs are fighting T-Rexes and all that kind of thing. So if you're sitting at home watching the movie with your friends and the music is very powerful and it creates a sense of tension and it works really well for viewing. The second clip is how the piece of music was actually absorbed by the community for the first time. And you'll see that the response to the music is very, very different to how it would be when you're sitting at home with your kids watching it. So it's a good example of the difference in social context and how that can impact on a text. So these are our questions for discussion, and you are answering these in your book. So where is the value in establishing a social, historical and cultural understanding of an author's background to better understand their point of view? Is it important at all to know? How can our interpretation of a text be swayed because we know of its context? And then finally, how does context shape a composer's view of universal human values? And like I said in that first couple of slides, that's things like freedom, equality, justice, and peace. So thank you for listening, Year 10. And I hope that it was useful, and that please go back to the original slideshow to help you out with your notes and for answering questions.